twilight cast long shadows across the kitchen as Emily Carter slowly chopped vegetables for dinner. The soft sound of the radio playing classical music filled the air with a calm that only a country house could offer. With methodical movements, Emily lost herself in her thoughts, planning a peaceful evening at her mountain home, far from urban chaos. Suddenly, the shrill ring of the telephone cut through the silence. Her heart skipped a beat as she wiped her hands on her apron and walked over to the phone hanging on the wall near the kitchen window. Seeing the name John flashing on the display, she hesitated for a moment, her stomach inexplicably tightening. John, her husband Michael's inseparable childhood friend, rarely called without a significant reason. "John." Her voice came out firmer than she felt. "Emily, it's me. John." The voice on the other end was choked up, hesitant, almost unrecognizable. "John, what's wrong?" "You sound strange," Emily said, gripping the phone cord tighter, a sense of unease growing within her. "Emily, it's about Michael." John paused, his heavy breathing audible. "There's been an accident."
Un terrible accident.
Emily's heart stopped. "An accident? John, please, just tell me straight. What happened to Michael?" "He's dead, Emily." John finally released the words, each one landing like a punch in Emily's stomach. "There was a car accident. It all happened so fast. I'm so sorry." The phone nearly slipped from Emily's trembling hands. She leaned against the kitchen counter to keep from falling. "Dead? This can't be true. There must be some mistake." "I wish it were a mistake, Emily. But I was there. I saw." John stopped, his voice choked by emotion. "I saw everything. I'm so sorry. They want you to go to the morgue. To confirm." Silent tears began to roll down Emily's face as she struggled to breathe, to think. I need to go," she murmured, more to herself than to John. "I'll be here for whatever you need, Emily." "Anything," John added, his own voice trembling with the pain of not only losing a friend but seeing her suffer. "Thank you, John." "I'll call when I know more," Emily managed to say, her voice almost a whisper. She slowly hung up the phone and remained still, staring at nothing, feeling the weight of the world crashing down on her shoulders. The night that promised to be peaceful now stretched out before her, dark and uncertain. Alone, with darkness settling around and within her, Emily sat down, the sound of classical music now a sad irony amidst the unfolding tragedy. She knew the night was far from over and that tomorrow would bring challenges she never imagined facing. Emily walked through the hallway of the small-town chapel, her black dress silently brushing against the marble floor. The air was heavy with the scent of lilies and the low murmur of respectful conversations. Family, friends, and Michael's co-workers had gathered, their somber faces reflecting the dim light of candles flickering around the closed casket at the front. She moved slowly past small groups of people, recognizing some of them through their sorrowful expressions and cautious nods. Each uttered condolence tightened the knot in her throat, a palpable reminder of Michael's permanent loss. John stood by the casket, receiving guests with a gravity that seemed forced. Emily approached him, her unease growing with each step. He seemed especially evasive today, his eyes quickly shifting away when they met hers. "John," Emily began, her voice low and steady, "I need to understand what happened. How could this happen to Michael?" John swallowed hard, his words seeming to get stuck in his throat. "Emily, it was a terrible accident. There was nothing that could be done," he murmured, avoiding eye contact. "It all happened so fast. But why can't I see him, John? Why is the casket closed?" Emily insisted, her voice trembling with a mix of pain and frustration. The damages were extensive, Emily. We thought it best to remember him as he was," John replied, finally meeting her eyes, but his voice still hesitated. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Something wasn't right, perhaps a woman's intuition, or maybe something in the way John couldn't maintain a steady gaze. "I need to see him, John," I need to truly say goodbye, she declared, her determination hardening. John ran a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. Emily, I really don't think that. Please, John. It's my right as his wife, she interrupted, the firmness in her voice more pronounced now. John looked around nervously, as if seeking an escape, but finally nodded reluctantly. All right, I'll talk to the funeral director. I'll see what I can do, he said, giving her a look that mixed sympathy and something she couldn't quite identify. As John walked away to speak with the funeral director, Emily turned back to the casket again, thoughts swirling in her head like a whirlwind. What would she find under that sealed lid? Why did everyone seem so eager to keep her away? She knew that the answers to these questions could change everything she thought she knew about the man she loved. Taking a deep breath, she prepared herself to face what came next, unaware that the real enigma was just beginning to unfold. The path to the morgue was lit only by dim fluorescent lights that flickered intermittently, emitting a nearly imperceptible hum. Emily followed Chris Parker, a hospital employee, down a narrow and oppressively white corridor. The smell of antiseptic was strong in the air, mixing with the less definable but equally penetrating odors of death and disinfectant. Chris, in his pristine white lab coat, seemed increasingly uncomfortable as they approached the morgue. His steps were quick, almost hurried, and he kept his eyes fixed ahead, avoiding eye contact with Emily, who followed him with a mix of determination and apprehension. "Chris," Emily called, her voice echoing slightly in the narrow hallway. "Can you tell me anything about what happened to Michael? Any detail might help." Chris stopped abruptly, turning to face her. His face was pale, and there was a tension in his eyes that she hadn't noticed before. "Mrs. Carter, I really don't know much. I was just instructed to accompany you. The circumstances... well, I think the director might explain better." Emily studied his face for a moment. "Do you always accompany widows to the morgue, Chris? Is it always this hard for you?" Chris averted his gaze, focusing on an indistinct point behind her. "It's not always like this," he murmured almost inaudibly. "But each case is different." Resuming their walk, they finally reached a heavy steel door, marked only by a silver plate reading "Morgue." Chris extended a trembling hand to open the door, hesitating for a moment before pushing it open. The inside of the morgue was cold, both in temperature and atmosphere. Large metal drawers lined the walls, and in the center of the room was a stainless steel table. The smell of chemicals was even more intense here, causing Emily to involuntarily wrinkle her nose. Chris led Emily to a more secluded area, where a drawer was partially open, revealing a black body bag. "We are here," he said, his voice a whisper. "Are you ready?" Emily took a deep breath, feeling a surge of emotion rise in her throat. "Yes, I'm ready. Please show me." With a solemn nod, Chris pulled the drawer completely out and slowly unzipped the bag. The dim light of the morgue cast soft shadows over the contents, bracing Emily for the inevitable. But as Chris revealed the face of the man inside the bag, Emily recoiled, a hand covering her mouth. The face she expected to see was not Michael's. Confusion and fear flooded her thoughts as she looked to Chris for some explanation. "Chris, what does this mean?" Emily managed to say, her voice trembling. Chris, with his eyes finally meeting hers, looked as confused as she was. "Mrs. Carter, I don't know." In that moment, the cold air of the morgue seemed to become even chillier, and Emily knew she had to uncover the truth, whatever the cost. The shock of not recognizing the body Chris Parker had just revealed was still pulsing through her veins as Emily leaned against the cold wall of the morgue. Her heart was racing, and her breath seemed to escape her with each gasp. As she tried to comprehend what was happening, the conversation of two employees at the end of the corridor caught her attention. "Did you see the last request that came in for Thompson's body? They want him to look decent for the closed wake tomorrow," said a male voice, low and hurried. "Yeah, I heard. It's going to be quite a job, considering the state he arrived in," responded another voice, this one deeper and weary. But with the right makeup and some work on the tissue, no one will notice the difference. Emily furrowed her brow, the words Thompson and makeup igniting an alarm in her mind. Her husband, Michael Thompson, was supposed to be dead, but the body they had shown her wasn't his. And now, these two were talking about preparing a body for a wake. She needed to know more. Silently stepping out from her hiding spot, Emily followed the sound of their voices to a small room adjacent to the main morgue area. The door was ajar, and she could see the two men with their backs to her, leaning over a table covered in papers. "I think with the help of some fillers too, we can make him look a bit more plump, so to speak," commented the taller one, gesturing with his hands as if molding the air. "Exactly. And we have to make sure everything is perfect for the viewing. The director is quite concerned about the family's reaction, and the friends, of course," added the other, his voice laden with bureaucratic seriousness. Unable to hold back any longer, Emily knocked on the door, causing the two men to jump in surprise. "Sorry to interrupt," she began, her voice firm despite the internal tremor, "but I couldn't help overhearing you talking about making up a body. I am Emily Carter, Michael Thompson's wife." The men exchanged quick glances, clearly uncomfortable. "Mrs. Carter," started the taller one, "we were just discussing the standard procedures that are sometimes necessary in our line of work." "Standard procedures that include making up a body to look alive?" Emily asked, her suspicion growing. "I saw the body you claim is my husband's, and it wasn't him. What is going on here?" The shorter of the two cleared his throat, clearly trying to find the right words. "Mrs. Carter, there's clearly some misunderstanding. The body you saw, well, there might be a mix-up with someone else." "There's no mix-up that justifies what I'm going through," Emily retorted, frustration and fear giving way to anger. "I demand to see the body of my husband, Michael Thompson, now. No more games." The men looked at each other again, uncertainty etched on their faces. Finally, the taller one nodded slowly. "We'll take you to him," he said, resigned. Guided by the employees, Emily walked back down the sterile corridor to the main morgue area. With each step, the fear of what she might find mixed with a fierce determination. She was about to uncover the truth about what happened to Michael, and something told her that what was coming could change everything forever. Emily followed the two morgue employees back into the cold room where the coffin supposedly containing her husband Michael's body was placed. The chilly air seemed to carry a weight that intensified with each step she took. Her heart raced, not just from the fear of confirming her loss, but also from the terrible suspicion that something was very wrong. "Right this way, Mrs. Carter," said the taller employee, indicating a coffin isolated in a reserved area of the morgue. The light above the coffin emitted a soft glow, almost like a spotlight that outlined the gravity of the moment. "Is it all right if we open it?" Emily asked, her voice trembling yet determined. Chris, who had been following in silence, stopped and looked at Emily with a clearly concerned expression. "Mrs. Carter, I really don't think this is a good idea. The conditions of the body might be disturbing." "I need to see, Chris. I need to be sure," Emily insisted, locking her eyes onto his, searching for some form of stability amidst the storm brewing inside her. With a reluctant sigh, Chris nodded to the other employee, who hesitated for a moment before moving toward the coffin. "As you wish," he said, inserting a key into the lock and slowly opening the heavy lid. The sound of the coffin opening echoed through the silent space, each creak and groan amplified by the mounting suspense. Emily held her breath, bracing herself for what she was about to see, her trembling hands grasping the edge of a nearby metal table. As the lid was fully lifted, soft light illuminated the interior of the coffin, revealing the face of the man lying within. Emily stepped closer, her eyes wide with the agonizing anticipation of recognizing Michael, but what she saw made her stop abruptly. The man in the coffin bore similar features, but it definitely was not Michael. The face was older, the lines deeper, and there was a subtle scar across the chin, something Michael certainly did not have. This isn't possible. This isn't Michael, Emily exclaimed, turning to face Chris and the other employee, her voice rising in a mix of confusion and anger. Who is this man? What is going on here? Chris, clearly uncomfortable and surprised by the revelation, exchanged a quick glance with his colleague. I don't know, Mrs. Carter. There must be some mistake, some terrible mistake. A mistake, Emily repeated, her indignation swelling within her. I was brought here to identify my husband, and you show me a stranger? Where is Michael? Where is my husband's body? The two men had no answers, only exchanging looks of uncertainty and concern. Emily, realizing she would not get more information from them, knew she had to take further action. I'm going to the police, she declared firmly. I need answers, and it's clear I won't find them here. With a renewed sense of purpose, Emily stepped away from the coffin, passing by the astonished employees. She walked briskly toward the exit of the morgue, her thoughts swirling with betrayal, mystery, and the need to uncover the truth about Michael. The determination to unravel the mystery behind her husband's disappearance would guide her through whatever dark revelations lay ahead. Dry leaves crackled under Emily's feet as she walked through the city park, the place where she and John had agreed to meet. Twilight cast a golden veil over the scene, but the beauty of the sunset couldn't soften the tension Emily felt. She spotted John sitting on an isolated bench, absently watching the ducks swimming tranquilly in the lake. John, Emily called out, her voice firm, cutting through the silence between them. John turned around, his face pale against the encroaching darkness. Emily, I was waiting for you, he said, his voice trembling, betraying his nervousness. Let's get straight to the point, John. I need to know everything. And I want the truth, Emily demanded, sitting next to him but maintaining a cool distance. John sighed, running his hands through his hair before looking at her. I know you deserve answers, Emily. Michael was. He was desperate. The debts were suffocating him, and then he found out about the life insurance policy. A policy that would conveniently pay out more if it was an accident, right? Emily interrupted, already familiar with the details. Yes, John admitted, lowering his gaze. He convinced me it was the only way out. He planned everything, every detail, and asked for my help. I shouldn't have agreed, but his situation moved me. You faked an accident, manipulated evidence, deceived everyone. How could you? Emily's voice was laden with disgust and disbelief. John swallowed hard. I thought only of helping a friend. I never wanted to hurt anyone, especially not you, Emily. I feel terrible about all this. Where is he now, John? Where is Michael? Emily pressed, looking him straight in the eyes, searching for a glimpse of remorse or hesitation. I really don't know. After everything was settled, he said he would start over, somewhere far away. He didn't give me details, John responded, evasive. You realize this doesn't end here, don't you? This is fraud. It's a crime. And I don't know if I can just let it go, said Emily, anger and sadness mixed in her expression. I understand, John murmured, and I will accept the consequences of what I've done. I just ask that you believe my intention was never to cause pain. Emily stood up, her heart heavy and her mind in turmoil. I'll think about what to do, John. For now, it's better if we keep our distance. She walked away, leaving John alone in the growing dusk. As Emily walked back to her car, she pondered the actions she should take. John's revelation not only confirmed her suspicions but also opened a chasm of ethical and moral decisions before her. With each step, she knew she was approaching a crossroads that would define the course of her life from that moment on. The morning after her meeting with John, Emily woke up feeling a mix of determination and despondency. The sun had not yet fully risen, but she was already up, sipping her coffee in the quiet kitchen of her home. The encounter with John had left a bitter taste of betrayal and unfinished revelations that propelled her to seek all the answers. Knowing she couldn't tackle this situation alone, Emily decided to seek professional help. She had heard of David Wilson, a private investigator known for his meticulous and effective work. Without hesitation, she picked up the phone and dialed the number she had found online. "David Wilson, private investigation, good morning," answered a calm and confident voice on the other end. "Good morning. My name is Emily Carter. I need help with a particularly delicate case. Is it possible to schedule a meeting today?" Emily spoke quickly, feeling an urgency she didn't want to convey, but which was inevitable. "Of course, Mrs. Carter. I can see you at 10 o'clock if that suits you," replied David, his voice conveying a confidence that somehow reassured Emily. "Perfect, I'll be there." "Thank you," she said, before hanging up and starting to get ready. Dressing carefully, she chose an outfit that reflected the seriousness of the situation: a somber blazer and black trousers. Heading to David Wilson's office, located in a discreet building in the city center, Emily felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. The building was old, with an exposed brick facade and tall windows. She went up to the third floor and found the door with a bronze plaque reading, "David Wilson, Private Investigator." She knocked lightly and was greeted by a man of medium height, with meticulously combed back gray hair and a perceptive look that immediately assessed his client. "Mrs. Carter, I'm David Wilson. Please, come in." David's office was a reflection of his profession, organized, with a large wooden desk covered in files and a computer. Photos of past cases and diplomas decorated the walls. Emily sat down in front of him, crossing her legs nervously. "So, Mrs. Carter, how can I assist you today?" David asked, his pen poised over a notepad. Emily took a deep breath before beginning. "It's about my husband, Michael. He was recently declared dead, but I discovered that it was all a fraud. He faked his own death with the help of a friend, and now I need to know where he is and why he did this." David listened attentively, occasionally nodding as he made notes. "I understand. Do you have any specific detail that might help us get started? Any document, recent communication, something that might lead us to him?" "I have some emails, messages, and information he shared with me about his movements before his disappearance," Emily said, handing David an envelope with the documents she had prepared. David briefly examined the papers. "This is a good start. We'll track every lead and see where they take us. Don't worry, Mrs. Carter. We'll do everything in our power to unravel this mystery." Leaving David's office, Emily felt a new wave of hope. She knew the road ahead would be complicated, but she was determined to push forward, no matter how difficult it might be. With an experienced investigator by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next, confident that the truth about Michael would finally be revealed. After leaving David Wilson's office with a renewed sense of purpose, Emily felt revitalized. It was as if, finally, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Alongside David, a meticulous and determined private investigator, she felt capable of uncovering the true story behind Michael's elaborate ruse. In the following days, Emily and David delved deep into the investigation. They started by reviewing all communications between Michael and his acquaintances in the days leading up to his supposed death. Each email was dissected, every text message scrutinized for hidden clues or coded messages. "Look at this, Emily," David pointed to a specific email on his laptop. "Michael mentioned a meeting with a certain BF here. This was 2 days before he disappeared." "BF? Brian Foster," Emily suggested, recalling the name of the insurance agent involved in Michael's policy. "Precisely," David agreed, a spark of excitement in his eyes. "I think we need to talk to Mr. Foster. He might have more information on what really happened." They arranged to meet Brian Foster the next morning at a discreet cafe in the city center. Emily felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation as she prepared for the meeting. Dressed professionally yet assertively, she met David outside the cafe, and together they entered, spotting Brian already seated at a table in the corner. Brian, a middle-aged man with a cautious expression, stood up as they approached. "Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Carter," he greeted, extending his hand. "Thank you for meeting with us, Mr. Foster," David said as they sat down. "We are here to discuss some matters concerning Michael Thompson." Brian nodded, looking at Emily with a sympathetic expression. "I understand you're looking for answers. I can imagine how difficult this must be for you, Emily. So, can you tell us how you were involved in this insurance fraud?" Emily asked directly, her voice firm, leaving no room for evasion. Brian sighed, his eyes shifting to the table before returning to meet theirs. "Michael contacted me a few months before. He was desperate, talked about debts, about starting anew. He knew about the insurance policy and offered me a share of the money to help him fake his death." "And you agreed," David noted, not as a question, but as a statement. Yes, I agreed," Brian admitted, guilt weighing on each word. "It was a terrible mistake. I had never done anything like that before. I suppose greed and the fear of losing my job influenced me." "Where is he now, Brian? Do you know where he went after dying?" Emily asked, her hope of finding Michael growing with each revelation. Brian shook his head. "He never told me exactly, just that he was going far away. But he contacted me once after, from an unknown number, just to confirm that everything had been settled." Emily and David exchanged looks. "We'll need everything you have on that last communication," said David, already planning the next steps. "I'll help in any way I can," Brian promised, clearly relieved to share his burden. With this new information, Emily and David left the cafe, knowing that each piece of the puzzle brought them closer to the truth. The day was drawing to a close, but for Emily, the journey to discover Michael's fate was just beginning. Their next step would be to trace the origin of that last call from Michael, a task David was already meticulously planning. Following Brian Foster's revelations, Emily and David Wilson knew that the next step in their investigation required a deeper dive into the circumstances surrounding the man found in Michael's coffin. Determined to uncover every detail, they began by revisiting the morgue, armed with the new information Brian had provided. "Emily, I think we need to fully understand who this man was and how he ended up in Michael's coffin," David suggested as they drove to the morgue. "This will help us better understand the extent of Michael's plan and, possibly, his current whereabouts." "I agree," Emily responded, her voice firm but clearly laden with emotion. "It's horrible to think that someone was used in this way. We need to ensure justice for him too." At the morgue, they were greeted by the director, who, after some initial hesitations, agreed to help them access the case files, perhaps influenced by the determination in Emily's eyes and the legitimacy of David's investigation. David flipped through the files with professional efficiency, looking for any clue that could shed light on the identity of the unknown man. Finally, he found what he was looking for. "Here it is," he said, showing Emily an admission form. "It appears he was found unconscious in an alley downtown, with no identification, just a few weeks before Michael's accident." "That's so sad, and so convenient for Michael and his plan," Emily commented, sadness mixed with anger in her voice. "Yes, and look at this," David continued, pointing to another part of the document. "He was treated for an opioid overdose, but there were no other signs of substance abuse in his medical history. This suggests the drug might have been administered to him. So he was drugged and used without his consent. That's horrifying," Emily said, her voice shaking with indignation. "We'll need the help of the police to investigate this further," David proposed. "They might have access to security cameras or witnesses in the area where he was found." Agreeing, Emily felt the weight of the situation on her shoulders. "I never thought Michael could be part of something so despicable. We need to ensure that both he and everyone involved are held accountable," she declared, the determination on her face reflecting the gravity of her words. With this new mission, Emily and David left the morgue, ready for the next phase of their investigation. They headed to the nearest police station to speak with the detective in charge of the case, hoping that the police could shed some light on the identity of the man and the circumstances of his death. The meeting with the police promised to be a tough, but necessary conversation. Emily knew she was getting closer to the truth, each step bringing her closer not only to understanding the fate of the unknown man, but also to revealing the true character of Michael. What started as a quest for the truth about her husband was turning into a broader campaign for justice and redemption. Emily and David arrived at the police station with a mix of determination and anxiety. They carried with them a folder full of documents and evidence they had collected, ready to formalize the complaint and request police intervention in the complex and disturbing case of Michael Thompson. Inside the station, they were greeted by Detective Lopez, a middle-aged man with a serious expression that reflected years of experience in handling complicated criminal cases. Emily and David were led to a small interview room, where they could present everything they knew. "Detective Lopez, thank you for meeting with us," David began, handing the folder to the detective. "We have here a case involving insurance fraud, the drugging and use of a homeless person as a substitute in a fake death scheme, and various other illegalities." Detective Lopez accepted the folder and began flipping through the documents while listening. "I see," he said, his voice revealing a tone of concern. "And where is Mr. Thompson now?" "That's part of the problem. He has disappeared. He left no traces that we could follow so far," Emily replied, the frustration clear in her voice. "I see you have done extensive work," Lopez noted, impressed with the organization and detail of the documents. "We'll need all this material to open a formal investigation, and of course, we'll have to involve other agencies, given that Mr. Thompson may be out of state or even out of the country. We understand the complexity, Detective, and we're willing to cooperate in any way necessary," said David. "The important thing is to bring justice to the man who was used in this terrible scheme and to hold all involved accountable." "You've done the right thing by bringing this to our attention," Lopez affirmed, closing the folder. "I will initiate the procedures for the investigation immediately. I'll need a formal statement from both of you, and possibly more information as we proceed." Emily and David agreed, relieved to finally be taking concrete steps to resolve the situation. They spent the next hour providing detailed statements and answering more questions about their findings and interactions with Michael and others involved. After leaving the station, Emily felt a mix of hope and impatience. "How long do you think this will take?" she asked David as they walked back to the car. "These things can be slow, especially with the possibility of Michael being out of the country," David replied. "But now that the police are involved, he's going to feel the pressure. They have resources we don't have." "I just want this to be over," Emily sighed. "I want justice to be served, and I want to be able to move on." "We'll get there, Emily," David assured, offering an encouraging smile. "You've been incredibly brave so far." Comforted by David's words, Emily looked up at the sky, where the last glow of dusk gave way to the first stars. The case was now in the hands of the law, and she felt that she could finally start to think about the future, no matter how uncertain it still seemed. Days turned into weeks since Emily and David handed the case over to Detective Lopez. With each day that passed without significant news on the progress of the investigation, Emily felt the need to give a new direction to her life, something that could bring her a sense of purpose and normalcy after the whirlwind of recent events. One Saturday morning, while having coffee on the small porch of her house, watching the quiet street movement, an idea began to take shape in her mind. She had always had a passion for art and design, and often during her marriage to Michael, she had thought about opening a decoration and craft store. Now, it seemed the perfect time to turn that passion into reality. Determined, Emily spent the next few days researching locations, suppliers, and everything she would need to open her business. She found a small space in the heart of the city, perfect for a charming store. With her savings and a small loan, Emily felt it was possible to start something new and positive in her life. "You're doing something wonderful, Emily," her friend Clara said as they examined the space that would soon transform into Emily's store. "It's inspiring to see you turn all this adversity into something so creative and beautiful." Emily smiled, grateful for the support. I needed this, Clara. Something to keep my mind busy and my heart hopeful. I want this place to be more than a store. I want it to be a meeting point for the community, where people can find beauty and inspiration. In the following months, Emily worked tirelessly to open her store. She chose each piece of decor, each handcrafted product, with care and consideration, wanting each item to reflect her taste and her new journey. She named the space Emily's Renewals, a name that symbolized her own life renewal. Finally, the day of the grand opening arrived. The store was immaculate, with shelves filled with colorful decorative objects, restored furniture, and local artwork. Friends, family, and town residents came to support Emily, filling the store with laughter and lively conversations. "You really transformed this place, Emily," David told her during the opening, admiring one of the art pieces on the wall. "I'm impressed with what you've managed to do in such a short time." "Thank you, David. Your help was crucial for me to get here," Emily replied, her heart warmed by the welcoming atmosphere she had created. As the opening night went on, Emily felt a mix of relief and joy. She knew there were still challenges ahead, especially with the legal case still pending, but now she had something of her own, a project that kept her motivated and focused. She was rebuilding her life, piece by piece, and for the first time in a long time, she felt genuinely optimistic about the future. After the exhilarating opening of her store, Emily allowed herself a moment of rest. With the sun still cheerfully shining in a cloudless sky, she decided to take a walk through the city park, a place where she usually found peace and serenity. The trees were full of vibrant green leaves, and flowers blossomed in a rainbow of colors, creating a perfect setting to clear the mind and rejuvenate the spirit. Walking along the well-maintained paths of the park, Emily watched families playing, couples sharing picnics, and children running joyfully. She breathed in the fresh air, trying to absorb the tranquility of the surroundings, when a particularly happy scene caught her attention. A familiar laugh, a voice she would recognize anywhere, froze her in place. Her heart raced, and a sense of disbelief washed over her. There was Michael, the man she believed to be dead, carelessly playing with two young children at one of the park's playgrounds. He was pushing a girl on a swing while a younger boy tried to climb the slide. Michael laughed and encouraged the boy, completely absorbed in the moment. Emily felt a wave of emotions flood through her. Anger, betrayal, shock, and a sharp pain that seemed to slice her heart in half. She took a few hesitant steps toward him, each movement charged with an intensity she could barely control. "Michael!" Her voice came out stronger than she intended, laden with all the emotions bubbling inside her. Michael froze, his expression of happiness turning to shock upon hearing his name. He turned slowly, his face paling as his eyes met hers. The children, oblivious to the tension, continued to play, laughing and shouting joyously. "Emily!" "What? How?" Michael stammered, clearly struggling to find the right words. He took an uncertain step toward her, as if wanting to explain, but Emily raised her hand, stopping him. "How could you, Michael? How could you fake your own death? Let me think I had lost you forever." Emily's words were like blades, each one loaded with pain and accusation. Michael lowered his head, unable to meet Emily's wounded gaze. I thought it was the only way. I was desperate, in debt. I thought I could start over, give a better life to these kids," he murmured, indicating the little ones who still played, unaware of the truth unfolding. "A better life? What about our life, Michael? Our history? You threw it all away as if it meant nothing." Emily felt tears threatening, but she held them back, her indignation giving her strength. "I'm sorry, Emily, I truly am. I never meant to hurt you," Michael said, his voice breaking with emotion. Emily looked at him, at the man she had loved, now a stranger made of secrets and lies. "I need time, Michael. Time to understand all this, to decide what to do," she finally said, before turning and walking away, leaving Michael behind, his figure becoming small and distant as she moved further from the life they had shared and closer to a new reality she would need to face alone. Emily stopped at a safe distance from Michael, still trying to assimilate the sight of him alive and breathing, a figure she had buried in her heart as a painful memory. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the emotional turmoil threatening to overflow. "Michael," she began, her voice trembling slightly with a mix of anger and sadness, "how could you do this to me? To us? To your family?" Michael looked at her with sorrowful eyes, guilt evident on his face. He took a step toward her but stopped when he saw Emily raise her hand in a stop gesture. I was desperate, Emily. The debts, the pressures. It all became too much. I thought if I disappeared, I could start over and eventually bring you all to a better life, away from the troubles I caused," Michael confessed, his voice low and full of remorse. "A better life based on lies," Emily retorted, incredulity coloring each word. "You faked your death, Michael. You let me grieve, cry for you, while you were here, playing house with another family." Michael ran a hand through his hair, visibly shaken. "It wasn't like that. I wasn't playing house. Things didn't work out as I planned. I got involved with someone, yes, trying to build a new life, but it was a mistake. I'm sick, Emily, and the finances, they're more complicated than ever." "You're sick," Emily repeated, her anger giving way to concerned confusion. "Yes," Michael said, looking down. "Shortly after arriving here, I was diagnosed with a serious heart condition. And without enough money, it has been hard to maintain anything, even my health." Emily felt a pang of pity for him, despite everything. "Why didn't you come back? Why didn't you tell me the truth?" "I was afraid," he admitted, meeting her gaze. "Afraid of facing you, the legal consequences, the disappointment. I thought disappearing would be easier for everyone." Emily shook her head, a tear escaping involuntarily. "None of this was easy, Michael. Nothing." There was a long silence, broken only by the sound of ducks in the lake and children playing in the distance. Finally, Michael spoke again, his voice laden with a sincere plea. "I know there are no excuses for what I did, Emily, but I'm begging for your forgiveness. I want to try to make things right, if possible." Emily looked at Michael, the man with whom she had shared so many dreams and plans, now nothing more than a stranger before her. I need to think," she said finally, her words heavy with deep sadness. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Michael. Not now." With those words, Emily walked away, leaving Michael alone in the park. She walked back to her car, each step echoing with the weight of the day's revelations. As she drove home, she knew that the next decisions she would make would shape her future in ways she couldn't yet fully comprehend. In the days following the confrontation in the park, Emily found herself in a constant state of reflection. She spent long hours sitting on the porch of her home, staring at the horizon as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In her hands, a steaming cup of tea often rested, though it was frequently forgotten as her mind wandered. The decision she needed to make about Michael weighed heavily on her. She pondered all her options, considered the advice from David, and the support of her friends and family. But in the end, the decision had to be hers and hers alone. On a particularly clear afternoon, Emily received a visit from Clara, her longtime friend, who brought homemade cookies and a willingness to listen. They sat together, and Clara gently prompted Emily to talk about her feelings. "I see how much all this is affecting you, Em," Clara said softly, passing a cookie to Emily. "But you also have to think about what's best for you in the long run. What will bring you peace?" Emily sighed, her eyes fixed on the cup in her hands. "I know, Clara. And that's what's been so hard. Part of me wants justice for what Michael did, for the pain he caused. But another part wonders what would really be gained from it. He's already suffering, isn't he? Sick and struggling?" Clara asked, leaning forward, her eyes full of understanding. "Yes," Emily confirmed. "He's facing serious health and financial hardships. Taking him to court, I don't know if that would make anyone feel better, or just prolong the pain." Clara nodded, offering an encouraging smile. "And what about you, Emily? How do you feel about your new life, your store, and everything you've rebuilt?" Emily looked out at the garden where the season's first flowers were beginning to bloom. "I feel alive, Clara. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm in control of my life. I have my store, which is doing well, and a community that supports me. I want to focus on that, on my happiness, not on the past." "Then maybe that's your answer, Em," Clara suggested gently. "Maybe moving forward and focusing on the positive is the justice you need." Emily pondered this for a long moment, then finally, a slight smile began to form on her lips. "Maybe you're right, Clara. Maybe it's time for me to truly leave the past behind and start looking to the future." Strengthened by her decision, Emily felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She chose not to pursue legal action against Michael, opting instead to fully dedicate herself to the life she was creating for herself. It was a decision that not only marked the end of a painful chapter in her life, but also the beginning of a new one, full of promise and hope. As the sun completely set, leaving only traces of its light behind, Emily felt renewed and ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. She had chosen her happiness, a path she knew was right for her. As the first rays of sunlight lit up the sky of a new morning, Emily opened the doors of her store, Emily's Renovations, feeling a wave of pride and satisfaction. The air was fresh and promising, a constant reminder of the fresh start she had chosen for herself. Inside the store, each displayed item was a reflection of her personal and professional journey. Local art pieces, homemade decorations, and restored furniture that told stories of second chances and renewal. While arranging some new pieces in the display window, Emily was interrupted by the entrance of Mrs. Jenkins, a regular customer and respected member of the local community. "Good morning, Emily," greeted Mrs. Jenkins with a warm smile. "Oh, I just love what you've done with this new batch of vases. They are simply lovely." "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins," Emily responded, returning the smile. "I painted them myself. I thought of bringing a bit more color into the store now that spring is on its way." "You have a special talent, my dear," praised Mrs. Jenkins, picking up one of the vases to examine it more closely. "And how's life? I hope it's more peaceful now." "Yes, much more," Emily confirmed, placing a new floral arrangement in the window. "I decided to focus on what really matters, my well-being, my business, and contributing to our community." "A wise decision," Mrs. Jenkins agreed with a nod. "It's wonderful to see someone so young with such determination and courage. You are an inspiration, Emily." Mrs. Jenkins's words warmed Emily's heart, reinforcing her certainty that she was on the right path. After Mrs. Jenkins left with a new vase in hand, Emily allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought about the twists and turns of her life over the past years, the challenges faced, and the lessons learned. At the end of the day, as she closed the shop, Emily walked to the small park in front of her establishment. Sitting on a bench, she watched people passing by, families playing, and couples sharing moments together. She thought about how her life had changed and how she had grown. "I am where I should be," she whispered to herself, a smile forming as she watched the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Emily knew there were still challenges ahead, but now she felt equipped to face them with new strength and independence. The future looked bright and full of possibilities. Emily was ready to embrace each opportunity and continue building a life of meaning and happiness. As the day closed, she felt a deep peace settling in her spirit, a confirmation that, no matter the obstacles, she could find stability and joy in her new life.
So, if you're not subscribed yet, click on the subscribe button below and join our community. Thank you for your support and see you in the next videos.